So, Brett, from a government of Victoria perspective, Melbourne really getting hit, unfortunately, twice. And not that I want to dwell on that, but there has to be learnings from here, right? And that's what I want to focus on. So, what public warning system and or equivalent of that was being deployed, used, in the handling of COVID, because that's the latest one that we've had to battle?
That's really interesting, and it's a great question. And Victoria, Melbourne learned some very hard lessons more than 10 years ago now, with some very profound, catastrophic bushfires known as Black Saturday, and that certainly, in part, reshaped our approach to community warnings, whereby vague, nebulous, out-of-date, late information was provided back then, and that essentially cost livelihoods. And now we're in a great space where warnings are provided in a very timely way, with very customised information, very specific information, and quite direct in terms of action required. So interestingly, we have that in place for what we would call a traditional or natural hazard, so fire, flood, etc. And certainly through COVID-19, that system's been used to an extent. So is it being used fully? No, it's not, which is interesting. And we certainly have a bit of a delineation between the natural disasters that Australia experiences, be they fire, flood, cyclone, otherwise, and non-traditional, such as COVID-19 or a major transport accident, for example. So essentially we have two in place. One's been used to an extent, and the second one is what I call a bespoke mechanism that's been used with some effectiveness. And I guess the void between those two is interestingly being filled through social media, which obviously has its pros and cons as well, Mohit. So it's an interesting space to be in at the moment in Victoria.
No, and thank you for that. And you're absolutely right. It is a big, big learning for everybody. And the objective of what I'm trying to achieve today is for others to listen to us and learn, okay, and see how they can change and get onto their journey on this. So, General Atta, if I was to come to you and say, sir, we know for a fact that public warning systems in India, if deployed at the right time, will save millions of lives, right? How can we improve our system? Yes, we are on the right pathway, but how do we accelerate this pathway, being the vast country that we are?
Thank you, Mohit. That's a very appropriate question for India, particularly. I'd start by mentioning the fact that at the political level, at the governmental level, if the highest authority recognizes the fact that you need an alerting system, it makes a huge difference. Prime Minister Modi, in his 10-point program in 2016 on the whole issue of disaster risk reduction, which he spoke about at an Asian Ministers' Conference in Delhi, actually, on the 7th point, did exactly mention this. He spoke about utilizing the opportunities provided by social media and mobile technologies, and recognize the potential of social media and develop applications for all aspects of disaster risk reduction. I think that galvanized the Indian scientific community to a great extent, the disaster community to a great extent. And yes, we have much, much better systems today. And I think the best example is that of the National Cyclone Risk Mitigation Program, the NCRMP. You would be aware, in the year 1999, we lost 10,000 lives in the state of Odisha, which is one of the main states that was facing this from the Bay of Bengal, West Bengal and Odisha. The same thing in 2020, this year, when we had a major cyclone in the same area. We managed to, with the infrastructure, of course, that's a different issue, but with the warning systems which had been put in place, we managed to save a couple of thousand lives. I think the overall lives that were lost were 85 in the state of West Bengal. This happened because primarily the fishermen, for example, who are normally the ones who are very vulnerable, who go out into the deep seas, they now have a system by themselves where on an ordinary mobile, they can be alerted through a satellite-based system by which they can be alerted to an impending, approaching cyclone. Now, this is the kind of thing which we need to keep developing. We are at the moment developing a central alert protocol system, CAPS as it's called, This is almost similar to many other countries in the world. And recently only we had attended a webinar with many countries in the Western world who seem to be have developed this and already tested it to a very large extent. We are testing it at the moment in one state in India, in the state of Tamil Nadu. And basically, to explain it, is just a question of having a GIS map with you, drawing a polygon on it, and through that capturing all the mobile systems which exist within that geographical boundary, and being able to generate an SMS, a very small, short messaging system, alert going down to them, and at the same time being able to alert many other places, for example, railway stations, which are quite heavily populated in India, being able to put up messages on all the messaging platforms at the railway stations, on the National Highway Authority roads in India, and many other such instances. So this work is on at the moment, and overall we are looking at improving weather forecasting capabilities. We are looking at local, national, regional data management, all this scientifically better managed and at the same time brought into sync with the emerging alert system will definitely help to save a lot of lives.
No, thank you. And you're absolutely right. So Malcolm, can I just extend that across to Western Australia, if I may, please? Because, you know, in Western Australia, there is, unfortunately, a high degree of bushfires, right? How would a warning system help prevent that in the near future?
Very good question. As you point out, we have an annual experience of many wildfires or bushfires, and the emergency messaging system or alert system that we have in place is but one element. So I think it's really important to understand that planning for bushfires should occur well before anything impacts. So our strategy here has been one of invoking through a whole bunch of social messaging, websites, and other sort of marketing campaigns, social marketing campaigns, if you like, and preparing the community and preparing individuals and families and businesses so that in a nice, simple way, they can think about what might impact them in terms of bushfires, and then have a simple plan of a plan for the eventuality. So by the time a message appears through what we have as a fairly elaborate emergency alert website, an emergency alert system using cellular technology, by the time they get that, the message will be readily understood. I mean, that's our aim, and it's rather a perfect aim because it isn't perfect, but our plan is to invoke the messaging and to have people think about the hazards well before anything happens, have a proper plan in place. We give them the tools through the marketing campaign, have your own plan in place and some checklists and some the usual marketing ploys that organisations employ to make people think through with their family. So should a bushfire come along, what am I going to do? And by the time something does happen, it's well practiced and the message isn't a surprise, and they're not in a situation of kind of learned helplessness where they're just waiting for someone to tell them what to do. So half of the behaviour is already embodied before the message gets there. So I think this year we'll have a unique campaign which ties together all those strategies. And I think that's the key message we're learning, is that you can't just have alert. It's got to be an integrated platform right from the very beginning, from the simple things like fire station open days and marketing events, right the way through to eventually the alert appearing on someone's phone and saying, do this now. You don't want that message to be the first time they've ever heard anything like it.
You spot on. So I'm hearing all three of you guys say the same thing. Okay, Brett said it. Okay, General Atta said it. Now Malcolm, you're saying it. You need an integrated system that can warn, and it should not be the first time the public has heard of it. But Knut, let me ask you one question. If all my three esteemed panelists are saying that, why is it so hard for government to deploy this? Why is the uptake so slow and staggered around the world? What's holding it back?
Yeah, no, that's a question we ask ourselves on a daily basis. And I think to first start saying that there are quite a few deployments globally utilizing public warning systems in a very efficient way. And there are a number of examples where we have countries deployed one of the main channels that is available through the mobile networks. So we have countries like USA. After 9/11, they started to look at this, and this ended up in an implementation of with FEMA and IPOS. You have Japan, Taiwan, Israel with the sort of missile attack warning system. Greece has deployed this. Netherlands, New Zealand. All these are examples of countries that have deployed location-based alerting based on cell broadcast technology, and also other channels. Further, you have Australia, we have Sweden, Iceland, Norway, Singapore, that all have deployed location-based SMS as their main channel, and then additional channels. So there are many examples of countries that has made good progress on utilizing these systems. India also have regional systems that we heard also mentioned here from the Lieutenant General, that has been efficiently used in critical situations, like the Cyclone Afani, for instance, back in 2019. So I think that's important to mention. But the reasons why there's not a stronger adoption, I think it's mix of many things, as always, right? One thing is the fragmentation that we talked about earlier, that it's a challenge to get organized and put everyone behind a project like this. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of time. Funding can be an issue. Political cycles can definitely play a role here. Elections can be a booster for deploying systems like this. So showing actions and taking initiative and making sure you keep the population safe. But it can also play the other way around if you have suddenly a change of governments and things can postpone. So we definitely see that factor. Regulations is also something that needs to be dealt with in a proper way, and maybe you need to actually change some of your laws in order to sort of efficiently implement this. I think one key reason is the engagement with the mobile operators, the network owners, and how you work with them to actually deploy some of the main channels for alerting, cell broadcast or location-based SMS, or even both. There needs to be some kind of model to work with the telcos. What's the funding? If this is lacking, operators usually are moving slow on adopting to these things. And then I think I need to point to myself and the vendor industry as well. Maybe we have oversold some technologies too early. Maybe we have pushed more on particular technologies because that's what, let's say, a certain company is providing, rather than looking at this in a more holistic way. And of course, I mean, there's no doubt, for instance, that cell broadcast was in early days, it didn't have a great reach, and it was complex to set up phones, etc. Today, that has come much further. And for instance, in one of our deployments in Netherlands, we have now almost 95% reach in the population of cell broadcast. So a lot of things have happened, but there is still variations. In India, for instance, there is still a high percentage of feature phones in the country, and not everyone will actually be able to be reached by, for instance, cell broadcast. So you might have to have a multi-channel approach. So there's a fairly sort of complex picture, and actually to get involved in this, there's a need for a lot of knowledge. So I think those are the key reasons for why we are seeing a fairly slow uptake.
Thank you for that.